Well, g'day, and welcome to another episode of Kiwi Car Life, and you join me here as it has conveniently just begun to rain in a very dark and spooky alleyway with, on the face of it, two very similar cars. This is a 2006 facelift Honda Accord Euro 6-speed manual, and this is a 2003 pre-facelift Honda Accord 5-speed automatic, and today we're going to be doing two things. We're going to be seeing how the manual and automatic versions of the Accord Euro drive differently, and we're also going to be seeing the differences between the facelift and the pre-facelift Accord Euros. Let's begin by going over the exterior differences between the facelift and the pre-facelift cars. The pre-facelift cars have a sort of quite nice looking grey and chrome grille, whereas the facelift cars moved to an all chrome design. Another notable difference is that the facelift cars have a slightly different headlight design. The pre-facelift ones here have orange indicators, and the facelift ones move to an all clear design. They also have slightly different sport kit designs. Unfortunately, this pre-facelift one doesn't have it, so I can't show it to you, but they do look a little bit different. Round back, these cars are extremely similar as well, with the only really noticeable difference being that the facelift cars have a different tail light with a slightly more sort of tinted look, and you can especially notice it in the reverse light. The final notable difference here on the outside is that the pre-facelift cars came standard with 16-inch wheels with 205, 55, 16 tyres. However, a Euro R inspired wheel was available as a dealer accessory on these cars from new. The facelift cars moved to a standard 17-inch wheel with 225, 45, 17 tyres, and that Euro R inspired wheel was available on these as well in the same size. The interiors of these cars are extremely similar as well, but you do notice a couple of fundamental things between the cars when you first get in. The first one is the steering wheel on these facelift cars is much nicer. It does all the same features and controls as the pre-facelift cars, but it has some really nice 10 and 2 notches here, and has a slightly different design with a sort of circle here in the middle, which looks quite nice. The gauge clusters are also slightly different as well. With the pre-facelift cars, you notice that it has a sort of orange and white theme with a very basic trip computer, whereas in the facelift cars they move to a nice blue and white theme with a much more comprehensive trip computer, and they also move the position of the fuel needles and the temperature gauge as well. The seats and radio in this car and climate control and everything are basically the same between the two different models, but for the manual cars they have a slightly different shift knob design. In the pre-facelift cars it had a bit more of a sort of plasticky feel with a little circle on the top with the H pen on it. With the facelift cars though, they moved to quite a nice sort of floating glass H pattern look on a nice leather shift knob. For the automatic cars and the pre-facelift ones, it looks like it does in that car over there, with the button on the side and quite a big chunky knob on the top, whereas the facelift cars move to a slightly more sleeker design with the button to change gears on the top. But both of them have Tiptronic mode, which is very nice. For the rest of the world, except America with the Accord TSX and Japan with the Accord Type S, we got a 2.4 litre K24A3 with 140 kilowatt and 233 Newton meters for both the facelift and the pre-facelift cars. America with the Acura TSX and Japan with the Accord Type S, on the other hand, got a K24A2, which when the pre-facelift cars made 147 kilowatt and 225 Newton meters. For the facelift Acura TSX, it kept the K24A2 but got a minor power increase of 5 kilowatt up to 152 kilowatts, but somehow lost 2 Newton meters of torque in the process down to 223. So that's all of the pre-facelift and facelift differences. Now let's compare the transmission. Starting with a 0 to 100 run in the automatic. Okay, so that managed to do it in 8.5 seconds, and now let's see what the manual can do. So my manual Accord managed to do it in 7 seconds, so quite a bit faster than the automatic, but you'll probably be able to tell that my Accord does have a few mods on it. You know, it's got a tune, it's got an exhaust, it's got an intake, all of which you can see me installing up here. But now let's see how the automatic drives. The automatic is really, really nice, good, easy to drive in traffic, but at any moment if you need a little bit of a stab of throttle, It does exactly what you want to as soon as you floor it, and then when you're done, it shifts back into third and doesn't annoy you anymore. Now, the issue with this car is that it has really, really long gears. It is a little bit troublesome in that regard when you're on the open road, but if you really need to move and you just absolutely stamp on it in D, it's only ever going to go into third. It'll never change into second. And I guess what that means in practice is that it just feels a little bit sluggish. I'm just going to stop here and see how it goes off the line. Yeah, there we go. So you notice there it's kind of, how do I describe it? It kind of goes, it kind of holds the revs at about 3,000 while it girds its loins and gets going and the torque converter slips away. And then it kicks in and then you get on the power band. Whereas a manual one, obviously you put your foot down and it just goes, whoop, just straight away, all the way to red line. Driving the manual transmission Accord, let's see what it's like. The first thing that's a little bit annoying, first gear is in a good length to get going, but second gear is really long. So when you change gear, the revs drop from like 3,500 to 1,500. But yeah, so that's really my only complaint with this gearbox, but everything else about it is absolutely fantastic. It just has that bolt action sniper rifle notchiness to it. It's so direct and easy to use. Clutch is really nice as well on these. It's not too heavy, but it's also not too light where it just has no feeling to it. And the pedal box is placed fantastically as well. Okay, motorway on ramp. Here we go. Mate, with the tune on it and a manual gearbox, this runs rings around the automatic. And the automatic was nice and everything, but this, with a tune, is way faster, like so much faster, it's not funny. Now on the motorway here at 100 kilometers an hour, we're doing around about, I don't know, 2,400 RPM, so only a couple hundred RPM more than the automatic, so the fuel economy differences will be pretty negligible really. It sounds great, as we'll get to see here through the tunnel. There we go. Sounds good, man. It's just a joy to drive through the bends and out of corners. This thing moves now, man. So there we are. In conclusion, if we tackle the first topic of this video, pre-facelift versus facelift, look, really, there's not much of a difference between them, if I'm honest. I just quite like having a good trip computer that shows me my fuel economy and my range and all that stuff. In general, obviously, I'd say get a facelift if you can, because in my mind they look better, and if you're getting a TSX, they have more power. Automatic versus manual, it just comes down to what you want. Having now driven the manual one for a solid 6 months, and getting in the automatic one, I was like, oh, it's not going to be that good, it's going to be slow and all this. But I was actually pleasantly surprised. You don't really notice any power losses or anything like that because it's automatic, and it shifts fast, shifts smooth, so it is a very good automatic. Yes, the ratios are quite long, and with Honda engines having all the power at the top, you are sometimes wanting for power because you put your foot down and it doesn't want to scream at redline in seconds, so it just goes into third, and then you're sitting at like 4,000 RPM. It doesn't really get going terribly quickly. But of course, the manual solves that. So there we go. Thank you very much for watching this episode of Kiwi Car Life. If you want to see me putting a tune on this car, then click over here. And if you want to see me taking this car on track, then click over here. And last of all, thank you very much for watching.